when we look at the software development life cycle, when we look at the software development cycle, I mean, this diagram is sequential, right? The documentation development is overlapping. So we start PRD here, and it kind of goes through design and coding, and even if a testing phase, let's say marketing people attended some forum, customers forum, right? And they realized, oops, there are a couple of critical features that we need to add, or maybe there are some features which we don't need. They may interfere and communicate to software development team and ask them either to add a couple of features or remove few features. So that's what I'm saying. The requirements may change here, even though it is unlikely, but still those are possibilities. So they may change here. Functional specification, we start at planning phase, and design phase is the primary phase where the specification is developed and continues through coding stage. At testing stage, again, it may change if you find critical bugs that require changes here, or if there is change in the requirements, right? So similarly, when we talk about test documentation, when do you think we should start working on test documentation? As soon as we have the requirements or specs, right? As soon as you have availability, those documents available, and when you're free from the previous projects, right? Because in large companies, usually there are multiple projects running in parallel. So you may have documentation available, but you may not have the resources to work on it. Once you're free from all the previous work, or let's say you're hired for this new project, this is when you have time and you can focus on this. As soon as you have documentation available, you start working on your test documentation. So test documentation, and by the way, questions about what is the PRD, how do you start your testing process, when do you start, what is the functional spec, all those are questions on the interview, of course, because this is the essence of the actual QA work, the process that we should follow to provide the high quality softwares. Test documentation. So there are a few pieces of test documentation that we'll be talking about today, and test plan is one of those. Actually, there are different meanings that people put into test plan term, but most of the companies, when on the interview you're asked about test plan, this is a high-level document that describes the scope, approach, resources, schedule. So basically, it is a high-level document that tells everyone how your team, your QA team, wants to approach the testing of this product. Again, it has very few details. It is a very high-level document. It does not have the actual steps of how the software will be tested, but it does have the high-level items like features to be tested, features not to be tested, and I'll talk about it in a few moments, and the testing tasks, and also the test task distribution. Because when we are talking about large-scale enterprise softwares, oftentimes what happens, there are some aspects of software testing that your team may not cover. For example, we are talking about a product which will be localized. Localization is the translation of the product into other languages, right? The primary version of the product is released in English language and is installable on the English operating system. And most of the testing is done with this version of the product. However, if this product is being sold overseas, in Europe, in China, in Russia, let's say, then that product is supposed to be translated into other languages. And that product is supposed to be installable in localized operating systems. For example, Chinese version of the software is supposed to be installable on the Chinese version, Japanese on Japanese, and English, of course. Russian, language version of the software is supposed to be installable on the Russian version of the operating system. So this level of testing is called localization testing. And depending on your team members, you may or may not be able to cover it. Because to actually do localization testing, you're supposed to know the language on which that program will be written, right? So if you can read and speak, let's say, Russian, you can test the Russian version of the software. But if you don't know Russian, you cannot. Same with Chinese, any language. If you don't have any native or maybe non-native but very good, language speakers of particular language on which the software is supposed to be localized in your group, that means your group does not have the skills to test the localization aspects of the software. So these are the items that need to be put in the test plan. For example, the test plan will say, okay, we will have 20 functional features in the product, and we will cover all those in the English language version of the software, which is installable on the English operating system. However, the localization testing will not be done by our group. Or, for example, system testing. Sometimes when or large-scale tests. Sometimes to do, let's say if you're talking about client-server applications especially, or maybe web-based applications, when we talk about performance testing, your group may not have enough hardware, right, to test all the, let's say if you need to have, 3,000 servers, right, and 5,000 desktops to connect to your servers and test all the kinds of communication, there is no way your group can cover. You have 5 people, 5 desktops, maybe 5 servers, that's it. So there are some types of testing that your group may not cover. In which case, all this goes into test plan, and what you do, when I say you, I mean QA group, the QA group, says loudly and clearly, okay guys, this is what we'll test, this is what we will cover, this is what we will not cover. And the project management's job is to find owners for those aspects, for testing the aspects of the program that core team cannot cover. For example, you may, company may hire some contractors, right, to do the localization testing. They may outsource the performance tests or load or stress tests somewhere else. Or they may decide to purchase, automation tools and use some automation to do whatever testing. So it all depends. But the purpose of the test plan is actually to look at the product from testing perspective and communicate to everyone what can or cannot be tested and how long it will take to test. And those items, those project risks, should also be highlighted. For example, if the schedules are tight and you don't have enough people in the team, and you think you may need to hire a couple of more people, you should also highlight that and say, okay, with 5 people on the team, it will take us, let's say, 5 months to test. If you want us to be done sooner, we need to, a couple of more resources in the team. So all that stuff goes into your test plan. And QA department, QA team creates and maintains this document. And this document is started as soon as we have high-level requirements at the planning phase and continues all the way up to testing stage. But again, most of the work is done during planning and design and coding phase. And at testing stage, we may have some corrections, in case we find critical bugs and there are changes in the design, and then we need to provide some additional test coverage. In these cases, we will change our test plan that late in the game. Why do we need a test plan? We need this to divide responsibilities between teams who are involved in testing and developing softwares. If more than one QA team is involved, for example, if you have manual testing versus automated testing or localization testing to be done, we need to divide responsibilities between QA teams, multiple QA teams involved. We also need to plan for test resources and timelines. We need to plan for test coverage. And if the software is installable on many operating systems, and let's say you have 30 or 35 or 40 operating systems to cover, your software is very easily portable. And many databases, for example, my product that I'm working on right now is installable on 32 operating systems approximately and about 25 databases. You can imagine if you try to test each and every operating system with each and every database, right, how many permutations you have. And this is just the configuration that you will use, because in addition to that, you will have multiple test cases to cover functionality of the software. So you may not have feasibility to cover everything. So what you'll need to do in the test plan, you'll need to specify very precisely what will or will not be tested. And there is some risk management that can be done, and we'll talk about risk analysis at the end. of the lecture, and if you have any questions, you'll let me know. And QA role in test plan, related work is to create and maintain the document, and again, analyze it for completeness. And what is very important, the test plan needs to be reviewed by the project team leads and managers. When I say project team, I mean developers, marketing, support, technical writers, I mean everyone, and project management, of course, basically everyone who contributes to the software development. And by putting their signature under the test plan, they're certifying that they have read the document and they are okay with the job distribution, QA task distribution, and they have no problems with it. And again, if they see any risks, they will highlight it, and you can think about risk mitigation plans together as a team. And this is a very effective document, and I've seen it in work many times, and it is very useful, believe me. Next piece of test documentation is a test case. Test case is actually smallest test document that you might have. It is a set of, the definition I took from some official documentation. It is a set of inputs and execution preconditions and expected outcomes developed for a particular objective, such as exercising a particular program path or verifying compliance with a specific requirement. It is a very lengthy description, very official, put and form. In 2 words, in short form, test case is the smallest piece of test documentation that basically tells you how this particular feature or dialogue or window should be tested. Test cases may be as short as few lines or as long as several pages. It all depends how there are no standards on how big it should be or how small it should be. It all depends on the testing skills of the team. And when you design your test cases, always keep in mind the execution audience. So if the test case execution is done, within your own team, then you know that the people have good knowledge of the product or environment, and you may be, you may put some abbreviations in and stuff. If you know that your test execution will be outsourced to some other teams, and you are not sure what the expertise and experiences of those teams are, then you may want to put more details in your test cases. And the more details you put, the longer your test cases become. QA team, of course, initiates, creates, and maintains the test cases. All the and test cases can be combined in test suites, and which is basically, test suite is a bunch of test cases actually. And we start creating our test cases again at planning phase as soon as we can, as soon as we have any high-level requirements, and they can continue through the design and coding and of course testing stage. Why cannot we start at testing stage only? Why do we start at planning phase? Why?
We need the time to test at the testing stage.
Right, this is a very good answer. So when at testing phase, it will be too late to start working on the test documentation. Because at testing phase, the software comes to you and you're supposed to test. And of course you can test and write your test cases at the same time, but it will take you as twice much time comparing to the other way around, where you wrote your test cases in advance, and when the software comes to you, eventually you can only test and execute the test cases. And you will not have time, and you will not have resources, and if you don't do your preparatory work in advance, you will be late with your test activities, and eventually the bugs will be found too late, and we will not receive a high quality software at the end. During the course of lectures in the school, and by talking with other development and QA folks, oftentimes I hear questions, why do we need test cases? As I mentioned, you can test without test documentation, you can test without any planning. Agile development actually is the process where you don't have very officialized requirements, or you don't have to have documentation in place. You can just sit in one cube with developer, he will develop and you will test at the same time. this is a very legitimate technique. But again, it is not suitable for the large-scale enterprise softwares or very complex softwares. So when we're talking about large-scale softwares, we need to plan for the test effort, resources, and timelines. Without the schedules, you will miss your market opportunity, and the software will never sell. If the software doesn't meet the, financial expectations, the project may be cancelled, right? Or the project may be closed. And actually, very good software may miss, its target and will never be used by customers. So it is very important that we are on time and we have enough resources and we put, reasonable effort into it and get a high quality software. Also, we need test cases because and how we do this planning, I will explain you in a few moments. So we also need test cases to plan and review for test coverage. And again, I'll show you how we do this. We also need our test cases to track the test execution progress and of course to track defects and see what areas are impacted by which defects. And the most important thing, one of the most important things, we need test cases to track the software quality. Because actually, if you think about it, when we say, let's say the software is ready to be released, right? What does it mean? When the software is ready to be released, it means that it has sufficient quality to be released and to be used by customers. But how do you quantitate the quality? You personally, as let's say person A or person B, you play with the software and you think, my area looks good. I'm responsible for features Z and X and Y, and those features look good, so we're ready to release. But this may not be true because you don't touch other areas of the software, right? You don't have other features, don't test other features. So you need to look at the product as a whole, and test cases is a very essential, having test cases and tracking, your test case execution and pass rate is a very important tool to track the software quality. And it is a very important tool to quantitate the quality of the software. Now let's look at the test cases and in details and how we use them. As I said, one test case is a small piece of test documentation that tells you how to test a particular feature. So once you have the requirements and the specification, you have most of the information that you need to start developing your test cases. And by the way, if you don't understand documentation, you can talk to developers, managers, leads, your peers. And if after doing all that, you still have some gaps and some ambiguities and things that you do not understand, what other tools or means can you use to understand the software? How can you get yourself familiar with the software, besides talking to other people? Internet was a good example, right? But if it is a new product, it is not yet on the internet, right? What would you search for on the internet then? Similar products, right? You go and look for competitors' products, and you look for the users' documentation available. If the products were already released, there is a user documentation, so you can browse through it. Of course, your product will be different, but if it serves the same purpose, and who are your competitors, you can, you can get to know it from your marketing department. You can ask, who are our competitors? They will tell you, and they can tell you what are the products that we are competing with, and then you can go and browse for those products and eventually read the documentation and understand what the products are doing. What else can you do? Come on.
Explore the exploratory testing, basically try to explore and see how it works and try to understand.
Exploratory testing is a good example, but you can only do it if you already have the software available, right? So let's say if you are at the coding phase or testing phase, you have some bits that you can install and you can play around. If you don't have your software available yet, what can you do? You can actually check, especially if this is not the first version of the software. You can install the previous version, which was already released and tested, right? And you can, play with it on your own. You can install it and, just browse around. Also, if there are some versions that have been already released, you can easily find the test documentation, right, within your own company, and go through that documentation and see how it was tested. And test cases are usually detailed, so you can easily understand how the flow goes and what people do and why they're doing it, right? So what else can you do? Any ideas? Training classes, right? Your company may suggest training classes. It's not like each and every company is doing it, but large companies, they provide training for customers or internal trainings for, company's own people to get them familiar with the company's products. So you can talk to your manager again and ask about the training. And when I joined that biotech company in 2001, I was proposed this training and I went through it and it was very helpful. I don't claim that I understood everything, but most of it, yes, I did understand. And it was very helpful. So ask for it, ask for classes. You can always ask for some demo from your peers, from the, your colleagues. You can ask them, just can you please, give me brief demo, like 40 minutes, 1 hour. And people who know the product very well, they will easily do that. And it is actually a very good practice when, senior testers or leads or all team members train new team members, just because it speeds up the process very fast and everyone benefits at the end. So yes, it will take time from that person to explain to you what things are and how the software works, but everyone will benefit at the end. So feel free to ask for help if you think that you are stuck. Don't sit on your hands and, cry quietly. Now let's say you went through all this exercise and, jumped through the hoops and you finally understood what the product is about. And how the test case creation starts. Let's talk about a team of people because it's easier, for you guys to understand. If you are by yourself, if there are 1 or 2 people in the QA department, then everything will be done by you at your own discretion, right? But let's talk about the teamwork because this is what most of the companies are looking at. So most companies have QA departments, and most likely, I'm not saying that it will be this way, but most likely your first job will be in a QA team. Especially if you're looking for an entry position or a beginner position, it will be within QA team. Let's assume we have a team of 5 people and we have 10 features in our product. So once we know the requirements and we all went through the documentation, the manager or lead will usually get the group together and they will tell, okay guys, we have 10 features, 5 people. Let's distribute the features across the people. If you have preferences, let's say if you worked in security in the past and there are security modules, something that you dealt with in the past, feel free to volunteer and say, okay, I would like to take features A, B, and C, and someone else can take something else. But if all features are of approximately the same complexity, then each person can take 2 features. So if you cannot choose, then the manager or lead will choose for you. And those 10 features will be distributed across, 5 people. Each person, let's say, owns 2 features. And then what you do, you look at the requirements, specifications, previous test cases if there are such, and you start writing your test cases. We'll go through the exercise a little later. We'll write a few test cases so you guys understand how it is done. But basically, you would need to put some wording, in place. In any format, again, there are no standards. I personally prefer Excel spreadsheets because those are easy to edit. You can make any charts of your Excel sheets. But again, any format is good. Word is good. We'll be using Notepad just because not all of the machines here have Excel, I believe. All of them. I don't think all of them have. But it doesn't matter actually.
Open Office should be there.
Yeah, So anything. So it doesn't matter actually in which format you write them. What matters is the content of the test case. And so basically you look at the feature and you try to understand how would you test it. And then you put it in writing, right? And again, when we go through the exercise, I'll show you what is the structure of the test case. But assume once you are done with the test cases, you will have some number of the test cases written. It will not be the all-inclusive set of test cases, of course, because whatever you write will be based on your understanding of the feature. And you will have gaps, right? You will have some things to clarify with development. You will have some questions to yourself. This is fine. You go to developers, you ask them questions, they provide answers, you go and add more cases. Once you're done with your test case set, what usually people do, they exchange with those test cases. For example, I am responsible for features A and B, and Michael is responsible for features C and D. Once we are done with our test cases, what we do, I'm going to Michael, I'm saying, Michael, please review my test cases. And he will do the same to me. So I will be reading test cases written by him for features C and D. And he will be reading my creations for features A and B. And believe me, I will have few more cases to add to his test set, and he will have some feedback on my test cases, because each person thinks differently, and we look at things from different perspectives. So try to get as much feedback as you can on your test cases. This is very important, because when we write test cases, when developers develop, who checks their work? QA, right? Where QA is doing QA job, who's checking QA? Customers, right? And you don't want customers to find your mistakes. You want your mistakes and gaps and whatever hiccups you had to be found as early as possible. So try to get as many people involved in your test case reviews as you can. And what is very important, have developers review your test cases. I can tell you why it is important. They, as developers, they know where the faulty code may be, right? And they have some ideas in mind. They are supposed to be doing unit testing, which is basically testing modules as they develop them. But they don't always do that, even though it is that should be a requirement for the best methodologies, best development practices. It should be a requirement, and it is a requirement, but still not everyone is doing it. So they may have some flows, user flows in mind that they would like to test, but they may not have time, they may not have the courage, they may not have the desire to do it, but they know it needs to be done. So this is a good opportunity for them to tell you, if you stop by and say, okay, I developed 50 test cases, can you please review it? They will definitely add some more. And again, you can do those reviews periodically, because as we go through the through the development of the software, through that life cycle, they will have more and more details. They started with some prototypes, and then they changed the design, and now we need to add a few more cases. Some cases will go away, not like it will always be adding to your test set, but most of the times you will be adding and adding and adding to your test set. But let's say at the end you arrive to a state where you have 1,000 test cases, and we have a team of 5 people. And we are somewhere at the design or coding stage. And we need to put some numbers in a test plan. We need to tell everyone when we think we'll be done with our tests. How do you think we can project our timelines when we have this data? And the question is, can we give this data having this information in hands? How can we define the timelines? Can we?
Is there a rule of thumb,
Rule of thumb is a good rule.
like 10 cases a day or something?
Right, so we need to have one more piece of data. We need to know, to actually provide reasonable timelines, we need to know how many test cases a day one person can execute, right? Because this is what we created, but now the software came to us, and we need to test it, we need to run those test cases. We need to know at which speed we can execute those test cases. So the average number, again, this is in no way is a standard, but in my